And then finally, Vice Mayor Byington has a resolution.
Yes, Your Honor. This is a resolution to approve the continued use of the 2004 Comprehensive Plan, which guides the city's policy as to the land use and development in Oakwood. The fundamental document that guides Oakwood's city policy on land use and development is known as the 2004 Comprehensive Plan. City staff has recently documented accomplishments towards the comprehensive plan and goals and objectives, and conducted a detailed review of the comprehensive plan, and the log director and city manager presented the accomplishments and the results of that review to the Planning Commission on October 5th of this year. The Planning Commission adopted a motion accepting the report and recommending the council continue to recognize the 2004 comprehensive plan as the city's official policy guide in the area of land use and development. At this time, I'm going to ask the law director and city manager to make a presentation to council, and then following their report, I will introduce a resolution to accept the report and approve the continued use of the 2004 comprehensive plan as the guide for city policy in this area, as recommended by the Planning Commission.
Mayor, members of council, thank you for having me here to speak tonight. When I gave this presentation in front of the Planning Commission, the city manager said I was responsible for delivering the boring part of the presentation, and that's probably true tonight as well. I will try to make it quick and painless as much as I can. I'm really just here to kind of give you some background information on what comprehensive planning is, what it's all about. What I'm talking about is our 2004 comprehensive plan. I don't know if all of you have read this cover to cover, if you're certainly familiar with it, but this is the to guide our planning and zoning decisions. I want to talk a little bit about what happened before we even had planning and zoning as fields of study or fields of activity. It used to be that property rights among property owners were managed through private action. You know, if your neighbor opened up a tannery business next door to your home and you didn't like the smells or the chemicals that they were using, you had a private lawsuit maybe that you would engage in between you and your neighbor to sue for that private nuisance. Other ways that people managed property rights at that time were things like restrictive covenants and deeds, that sort of thing. It wasn't until probably the late 1800s, early 1900s when urban planning began to be a thing, and that's largely due to the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. You may have heard of that if you're familiar with history. A guy named Daniel Burnham was largely responsible for that, and for really developing the entire field of land use planning. By the early 1900s, you'll see there on the slide, I mentioned the 1916 New York City ordinance. That was the first time that there was a comprehensive zoning ordinance enacted anywhere in the United States, and it was for the city of New York. Following that, this kind of took off, because this was a way that government could enact blanket controls over land use, and not just the individual sort of reactive lawsuits that I was describing before. By the 1920s, there was something called the Standard State Zoning Enabling Act, and that was model legislation that was put out by the U.S. Department of Commerce. It was to govern land use planning, and by 1926, 19 of our 50 states had adopted it almost word for word. Most others adopted it with some variation in the ensuing years. So this really was responsible for zoning taking off in all of the states here in the United States. And then you'll notice there on the slide I mentioned a court case, the Village of Euclid versus Ambler Realty Company. That was the first time where the United States Supreme Court actually held that zoning was constitutional. It's okay for cities to start designating certain areas of their community where different types of land use activities can take place. Until 1926, it was kind of an open question whether that could be done. The Supreme Court decided that. And by the way, that Euclid case comes from the Village of Euclid here in Ohio. So Ohio is instrumental in zoning being declared constitutional throughout the United States. But the key concept from that case was that zoning regulations, zoning is a form of nuisance control, which is a reasonable exercise of a municipality's police power. And zoning regulations, therefore, have to be justified as through some aspect of exercising the police power, which means it's a regulation to protect public health, safety, and or welfare. You'll hear that phrase a lot, and you've probably seen that in a lot of legislation that I've written for you as council to adopt, that something is to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. The reason we use that is because that triggers an exercise of the city's police power. Most state land use laws are then based on that state zoning enabling act that I talked about just a moment ago. And buried in one of the footnotes from that, again, that was a model code that the U.S. Department of Commerce put out, buried in one of the footnotes was this little phrase that no zoning should be done without a comprehensive study. They used the phrase comprehensive study. They didn't define that, but they said that zoning should always be based on some sort of a comprehensive study. From that, you'll start seeing the comprehensive plan or comprehensive study type language appear in legislation. From our own Ohio Revised Code, Section 30302, which deals with counties, says that the Board of Commissioners may regulate in accordance with a comprehensive plan. Townships also have to regulate in accordance with a comprehensive plan. And 713.06 of the Revised Code, which deals with municipalities, uses slightly different language, but the same idea, that municipalities may frame and adopt a plan for zoning and land use. These are the state statutes that enable counties, townships, and municipalities to start adopting zoning regulations. And they all take that idea, the statutes take that idea of a comprehensive plan or a plan from that footnote in the State Zoning Enabling Act. So what is a comprehensive plan? First and foremost, it's the local government's primary statement of goals, objectives, and policies to guide public and private development within its planning jurisdiction. It's the chief policy instrument that the municipality would follow. For example, a lot of times you'll see in zoning codes that they reference these comprehensive plans in the standards for making a variety of zoning decisions. One of the things that our planning commission hears a lot here, for example, are requests for special use permits for a piece of property. And one of the standards that they have to look at when they're making that decision is what's being proposed, what we're being asked to rule on, is this consistent with the comprehensive plan that's in place in the municipality? That's one of the things to guide their discretion. Now, you remember from the previous slide, comprehensive plan is the phrase that's used for counties and townships, but for municipalities, it just says that they may frame and adopt a plan. Courts have said that a plan is not absolutely required for municipalities because of this permissive language. They may frame and adopt a plan. It doesn't say that they shall or they have to. It's not required, but as a best practice, it is highly recommended. There's some case law here in Ohio, and I'll spare you the citations, but the courts have held repeatedly that the existence of a comprehensive plan makes it more difficult to attack the constitutionality of a zoning ordinance. When you have a plan that underlies your zoning, then it makes it that much clearer that you are substantially advancing a legitimate interest in the health, safety, and welfare of your community. You're not acting in just an arbitrary and capricious manner. And arbitrary and capricious is another one of those phrases or terms of art that you hear lawyers throw around a lot. When courts overturn zoning decisions or planning decisions, they often look to whether that was an arbitrary and capricious decision. So we want to avoid that at all costs. Having a plan that underlies what we do in planning and zoning helps us do that. So again, what is a comprehensive plan? There are three essential characteristics of them. Number one, should be clear from the name comprehensive plan, it should be comprehensive. And what I mean by that is that a comprehensive plan encompasses the entire geographic area of the community and integrates all the functional elements of the community. Compare and contrast that to something like we had a 1997 sub-area plan that just looked at the sugar camp property, for example, and ideas for the redevelopment of that. That's a much more specific document. A comprehensive plan is much more broad. It's also a general plan. These are policies and proposals in sort of a broad summary form. It's not specific detailed regulations. Those would come more in the zoning ordinance itself. And third, a comprehensive plan is a long-range document. It looks beyond just the current pressing issues, and it looks at things prospectively. It looks on things on at least a 10 to 20-year timeline. Skip ahead through my notes here. Bear with me. All right. So a comprehensive plan is typically based on a variety of supporting studies. And I've included some examples here on the slide. There may be economic studies that a comprehensive planner looks at, demographic studies. They may do inventories or assessments of the natural physical environment or the location of the community as a whole. And from those documents, then they start putting together the elements of the plan. typically start with goals or a vision statement, which you'll see we have in our Oakwood plan. Then they move on to things like a plan for land use, which would be inventories and analysis of existing land uses, projections of future land use needs, a map of generalized future land uses, and bear in mind, this is not parcel or lot specific.
Sorry.
Wow,
Sorry.
the voice of God. So anyway, it's not parcel or lot specific like a zoning map would be. This is more of a broad, general land use plan. Transportation elements usually covered in a comprehensive plan. And these would be proposals for mass transit or transportation improvements that might be needed in a jurisdiction, an analysis of existing and projected traffic volumes, a thoroughfare plan to determine the locations of your main corridors and things like that. Community facilities would be examined in a comprehensive plan. That might be schools, hospitals, libraries, police or fire stations, parks, playgrounds, government buildings, cultural facilities. It may also, in some cases, include infrastructural analyses that might be included in community facilities. Usually there'll be a housing element that surveys the condition of local housing stock, assesses the needs of residents and those who are likely to reside there. It may look at the need for low-income housing, things like that, forecasts housing demand, and evaluates local regulations and constraints that might impact the adequacy of housing that's available in a jurisdiction. And then finally, sometimes they will include other elements as needed. These could include something like a fiscal plan. How are we going to pay for some of these things that we need to look at? An economic development strategy, historic preservation planning, things like that. Those are all things that might go into a comprehensive plan. So, comprehensive planning in Oakwood, how we've done it here. We adopted our first zoning ordinance in 1952, and that was ordinance number 1724. That was a standalone zoning ordinance. We didn't have a separate plan. The plan was sort of self-contained within that zoning ordinance, but that was the first time that we had a zoning ordinance, and it looked like you might expect a zoning ordinance. It divided Oakwood into 3 residential districts. There was an A, a B, and a C residential district. There was 1 business district at the time. And then it had a lot of the types of regulations you would expect to see in a zoning code, things that would regulate setbacks, the heights of buildings, the area and yard sizes, things that were permitted uses, accessory uses, special permit uses, off-street parking, fences, signs, all the things that you would expect to be regulated in a zoning code. We did that for the first time here in 1952. Then in 1989, we did our first comprehensive planning effort. The primary objectives that were stated in that plan were, there were 4 of them. Number 1 was to reinforce and strengthen existing land use structure in Oakwood. Number 2 was to encourage compatible and high-quality new development in selected locations. Number 3 was to improve traffic circulation and public transportation services. And number 4 was to enhance the community facilities and municipal services that are a hallmark of Oakwood. Those things probably sound familiar because those are all things that we still value today, that are still important for our community today. The direct results of that comprehensive planning effort were a number of planning and zoning efforts. One of them was that sub-area plan that I referenced from 1997 for the Sugar Camp area, which we no longer need because that site has been redeveloped now at this point. We also, out of that 1989 comprehensive plan, we developed design guidelines for the Far Hills Business District. Those guidelines are still in use today. And then also the 2000 zoning ordinance that was adopted was an outgrowth of that planning effort as well. And that's the third thing you'll see listed there is the 2000 zoning ordinance. We did a complete rewrite and overhaul of our zoning code in 2000, assisted by some outside consultants. Following that, in 2004, we did another comprehensive planning effort, and that generated the 2004 comprehensive plan that I'm here talking about tonight. That process was very involved. It was overseen by outside consultants, URS and TPAP, you see there on the slide, at the U.S. Corporation, and then Turkla Pettigrew, which is a big planning firm out of Chicago, a very well-known firm. They sort of spearheaded our efforts to do the comprehensive planning. And they helped us put together a committee to oversee that. The committee consisted of all the 5 members of City Council at the time, the city manager, the deputy city manager, 25 Oakwood residents, and then each of those Oakwood residents were each expected to develop a network of at least 10 of their neighbors, friends in the neighborhood, that could provide additional feedback throughout the process. So if you figure 25 residents who each develop a network of at least 10 people, you've got an expanded network of some 250 plus residents who are helping to inform this process. And they engaged in community outreach activities. You see listed there, they did a number of workshop events, completed questionnaires. The consultants conducted what are called key person interviews with 22 city officials, some long-term residents and long-term business owners. They did citywide surveys, a telephone survey. This all took place over a period of about 13 months, from May of 2003 until June of 2004, when the comprehensive plan was then adopted. The 2004 comprehensive plan includes 7 sections that you see listed there. The first one talks about the community setting, just sort of, where Oakwood is, where we're located within the Dayton region, highlights some of the major assets and advantages of our location in our region. It then moves on to a number of goals and objectives, which the city manager is going to come up and talk about here in just a moment. But the goals and objectives that were to be addressed through this plan. Then there are 4 items that you see listed there in yellow. Those are sort of the core of the plan itself. There was a land use plan, a transportation plan, a community facilities plan, and a community character plan. That community character plan is sort of an Oakwood-specific element. I didn't mention that before. When I say it's Oakwood-specific, it highlights sort of the features and characteristics that make Oakwood unique, the character of our neighborhoods, the compact commercial areas that we have, and how closely nestled they are with our residential areas, et cetera. And then finally, there's a section on implementation, which is sort of a recommendation for next steps in implementing the plan. And like I said, the 4 in yellow are sort of the core of the plan. So that's what I have in terms of just background on comprehensive planning. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
No.
All right.
Very thorough. Yes,
Thank
very
you.
thorough.
I'll turn it over to the city manager, and he'll talk about.
I told our law director after he presented to the Planning Commission that he would make a good professor. I think he would. I thought that background was important for the Planning Commission. Frankly, I learned a bit from that, and I think it's important to you and to the community as well. If you look around Ohio, given what Rob said, that these comprehensive plans or plans are not mandatory, you'll find a wide variety of things. You'll find, I think, a lot of communities that don't have anything. Probably smaller rural communities. I think you'll find then for the ones that do have a plan of some sort, you'll find a variety of written plans. Some will be 5 or 10 pages. Others will be the binder that Rob held up, 130 or 40 pages worth. So a wide variety. Dave Fell, our 3rd city manager here from 1962, 1992, I think I'm going to guess that he kind of was the impetus for us embarking in 1988 on developing the first plan. And I think it was very forward-looking at the time. I think he had a sense that the roughly 36 acres of the NCR-owned sugar camp land, which back at that time was basically all the land in Oakwood north of West Shantz and west of Far Hills, if you think about that, then bounded by the Corp line, that would become available for development and that we ought to get ahead of when that day might come. And he was right on that. And then he had the foresight with council's input, I'm sure, this was 3 years before I got here, to really make it a deep dive, so to speak, and a real comprehensive plan. And so the city went through a year-plus long effort to develop that first plan, and then early in my tenure as manager, we made the determination that it was probably time to review it thoroughly and update it, and that's when we embarked on the 13-month job to update the plan. Earlier this year, and this is something that's been on my mind for a number of years, but earlier this year, we being staff, department heads and I, documenting accomplishments or achievements towards addressing the goals, which are in 8 different categories, which I'll show you in a few minutes, that, you know, we've done over the last 18 years of the plan being in effect, and some of them even predated we included in there to predate the plan. So we began to write that down, and in effect, we created what is now a 26-page document, as I know I've shared with you, that clearly shows that we have, in most every category, done very important public work. And importantly, we've used the plan, you know, as the guide. And Rob mentioned that the Planning Commission uses it regularly. There are, I think, 9 standards in the zoning code by which the Planning Commission evaluates special use applications, and the number 1 on that list is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The Board of Zoning Appeals uses it from time to time, but you know, the staff here, myself and our staff here, uses it the most. And when you look at the goals and objectives and then all the various achievements, you can see that the regular sort of decisions, actions that we take or decisions we make year in and year out here, both operationally and project-wise, you know, we use that document to make sure that, you know, we're doing things that make sense for the community as a whole. And when I say makes sense, you know, it's based on this document that was prepared with the input of a lot of citizens here in Oakwood. After populating the goals and objectives pages with all these achievements, we began to think, well, this plan was approved in 2004, and now it's 2022. Should we embark on another rewrite of it? And that's when we began to really study the plan and consider whether we need to do that, because as you know, Oakwood is completely landlocked, and with the Point Oakwood and the Sugar Camp professional office land pretty much fully developed, and a number of infill lots have been developed over the years with residential development primarily. There really is very limited opportunity when you're talking about these 4 components: land use planning, transportation planning, public facilities or community facilities planning, and community character planning. So we came to the conclusion at the staff level and presented then to the Planning Commission that we think the plan is good as it is, and we don't need to embark on a major project and incur the expense thereof at this point in time. Now, that's not to say that a year, 2, 3, 4 from now, there's a change of heart and the community might want to engage in that, but we're saying right now we don't think it's important. But the resolution that we're asking you to approve tonight doesn't establish another time frame by which we're going to keep this plan as the official document for Oakwood. So again, if there's a change of heart next year, the year after, or 4 or 5 years from now, we can easily embark on a comprehensive program. So with that introduction, let me move very quickly through a few slides here. This slide just simply shows a number of words that we pulled out of the comprehensive plan that are used repeatedly. And on a number of these slides, you're going to hear some themes repeated a number of times. And, you know, a lot of these words show up in different places in the plan, but it talks about, you know, the fact that, you know, we are a classic bedroom community. That's how Oakwood was originally envisioned. I want to say 150 years ago with the original platting, and then certainly when we became a village and the primary development occurred in the teens and 20s and 30s and 40s. About 98% of our total land area is zoned residential. Again, we're landlocked, so we are a residential community and a bedroom community. That said, you know, the little bit of commercial we have, the plan talks in several areas about how important that mostly boutique sort of commercial property is, and we think that that which was established in '89 and confirmed in 2004 remains the case today. The plan talks extensively about, having high standards for our community in terms of public facilities and residential property. Image and character is important. The safety of the community, the public utilities, transportation, our green space is highlighted in a number of places there. It's rather limited, and so the plan basically says, let's keep what we have, publicly owned green space, and if we can expand on it, which we have a little bit over the years, then that's a good thing. The plan, while it is a city-created document, we mentioned the enormous value of our schools and our public library, and that remains obviously very important to us today. The plan clearly points out that we value citizen input in everything we do. That's as valid today as ever. And it also talks about how, even though we're just 2.2 square miles, a small suburb of the Dayton region, we consider what happens, in Dayton and elsewhere and throughout Montgomery County and beyond as critically important to Oakwood, and we ought to pay attention to it, be involved in it, and be helpful and a team player in these more regional things that might come up. So a lot of words here that you see repeatedly throughout the plan. In the plan, there's a page that talks about issues and concerns that were identified. Some of these, I think, date back to the original plan, but then they're articulated clearly in the 2004 plan. And as we read through these, I won't read these to you, we just saw, we kind of checked them off saying, yes, that still applies today. Yes, it applies. And we really found nothing within these issues or concerns that we found problematic that ought to be removed. The last one here is focused on specific geographic areas. There's a couple I'll mention here in a few slides from now that are important to us. The list continues for a couple more slides here. Again, preserving and enhancing. The plan doesn't talk about the city wishing to embark on projects to make substantial change to our city. There's a lot of interest in kind of keeping this beautiful community on track, on the track that it was set on by the founding fathers, so to speak. Top quality facilities is very important, and again, supporting the schools is very important. And again, some of this is repetitive. The parks, natural areas, the public infrastructure. Again, the first platting 150 years ago. Most of the utilities in Oakwood, underground buried utilities, have been in place for approaching 100 years. So, keeping up with the needs there is very important. And then, again, public input and participation. The next three slides are the bullet points from our city vision statement, and we share these with the community twice annually, once in our budget document that we compile, in early January after the budget's been approved for the coming year. And then we also put it each year as the back cover to the annual report that goes to every property owner. This vision statement was first established in 1997 under City Manager Mike Kelly's leadership, and with I don't remember the details, but quite a bit of input, obviously, from City Council and others. And there were some minor modifications made to it in the year 2000, and then as part of the 13-month rewrite in 2003-04, the committee and the different participants reviewed these bullet points of the vision, and basically, again, read through them one by one and checked off that these still apply in 2022 or in 2004. We've done the same thing here and believe that there's not a word in these that we would change. Again, I won't read all these to you, but it's along the same themes that you've seen. And then again, the plan is broken up into those four parts: land use, transportation, public facilities or community facilities, and community character. Heavy concentration and emphasis on residential. the importance of the commercial aspect, and that we, while we want to probably have deference towards the neighborhoods and residential, we want to be very open to the needs of the business community, and, when there's some compromise needed, be open to considering how we might address the needs of both the residential and the commercial. I mentioned a couple of the special areas. These were identified in the 2004 plan. Obviously, the north end, near a block from where I live on Volusia there, at our North Corp line, having the University of Dayton there, offers some challenges from time to time, and that's an area that we invest a lot of staff time on, with cooperation from UD staff to kind of manage the, I'll say, the character and all of that neighborhood. And then the other one was the Shore Road corridor, which prior to our 2017, major change to that, it was a rather challenging community edge to deal with, and but I think that, as we've talked to many times, the road diet plan there has completely changed that. So that's I guess it's definitely one of the achievements that we list on our update. The transportation portion of the plan talks about volume, signalization, speeding, parking, the school areas, particularly Smith and Harmon, but also the junior, senior high. You know that over the years we've made a number of improvements there. Talks about public transportation, and then maintaining our infrastructure and the capital planning thereof. None of these things, again, during our review, popped out as things that we would, here in 2022, wish to change. And so, again, we feel these are very much appropriate. Same with the community facilities plans. Obviously, the schools have done a lot in improving their facilities. The library recently, this facility, while it is, we moved into it in 2004, so it too is becoming a little bit dated. It's a wonderful facility and a great improvement. And the Public Works facility, which was opened in 2000, likewise. Our water system, sanitary sewer, storm water, I mentioned earlier, critically important. These are mentioned in the plan. They remain important today. Our fiber optic system, we were a pioneer in that field. It was roughly 20 years ago when we completed, maybe a little bit longer, about 20 years ago, our citywide public fiber optic system. And that was mentioned in the plan. Our Parks and Rec Department, or as we call it, the Leisure Service Department, was highlighted in the plan. We believe that the words in there remain as important today as in 2004. And the value of our Oakwood Historical Society was identified in 2004 and remains a high priority for us today. And then the community character plan, neighborhoods, building condition, quality, and all that I mentioned before. Landscaping, you recently passed an ordinance to broaden our landscaping ordinance, and I think that's been well received. But these are all things that the community thought about, again, back in 2003 and 2004. And then finally, 2 more slides after this. Again, our business districts are highlighted in the plan, our street corridors, and then some other features. So the achievements portion that I mentioned at the outset, we will post that on our city website, and we've put in red print all of the various projects we've completed. But we want to put that out there for the community to see, those who are interested. They're broken down into 8 different categories. The first 4 you see here, and then the second 4 here. So I think it's a very comprehensive plan. I think it serves the community well. Importantly, there's been no indicator or incident or event that has made me think that we need to open it up and engage in a complete rewrite. In other words, the plan is working year in and year out as designed. So we're here tonight to recommend that you accept the document, and we.
Any questions for our city manager?
I have two. I'm sorry, Norm, I think you said this. The plan is on the website, right?
It is.
Okay. And then I know about 10, 12 years ago, you all did a athletic master plan. Is that just kind of off to the side? And so any changes, the result from that would, sort of feed in through the guidelines of the comprehensive?
Correct. And that kind of falls into the category of what Rob said earlier, that, that this comprehensive plan is community-wide. And like the sub-area plan that we prepared in 97 was specific to a land area, the 2010 Athletic and Rec Master Plan was specifically looked at Old River, Irving, Krieger, and the OCC property, those four.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Next, one of the most important committees that the city has is our Planning Commission, and it consists of 5 members. All 5 are citizens of Oakwood. Vice Mayor Byington is our council liaison to the Planning Commission, and then we have 4 other citizens who spend a lot of time dealing with these land use type issues. Our current chair of the Planning Commission is Andy Ite, and if you'd like to come and address council regarding this matter, we'd appreciate it, and welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of council. Thank you for having me. Some of you don't know, but I've been with the city of Kettering for quite a while, and one of my first jobs, in fact, my first title was long-range planner for the city there. And after about 5 years of work, we ended up hiring a consultant and developing a comprehensive plan for the city. That city plan was developed back in 1997. It's still in effect today. So it gives you an idea of comprehensive plans and how long they last and usually how well they're done. I think that those kind of plans and this kind of plan is something that I feel comfortable as the chairman of the Planning Commission, as well as the entire Planning Commission feels comfortable having all of you adopt and continue. The only thing I think as a comprehensive plan, and I know that I've argued to update our comprehensive plan in Kettering for several years now, is that I think our lifestyles are changing a little bit, but they're changing so slowly that I think our comprehensive plan still addresses that and how we changed the way we live. And if we are going to have living units over our garages, those kind of things can happen, but we can also deal with those at the Planning Commission and also apply the current comprehensive plan that can address those. So I don't know that I need to say much more than what we already heard from Rob and Norb. They did a great job for us and actually went into more detail than what they did tonight. But I feel that this comprehensive plan and the continued adoption of this comprehensive plan will be great for the city.
Great. Any questions for Andy? Again, I want to appreciate all the efforts you do on behalf of our city. So I guess Kettering pays you, but we get you for free. Is that right?
That's right.
You pay me a little bit.
Okay.
That's right.
Not for comprehensive planning.
Right. Okay. I understand. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming and talking to council about this. So, Vice Mayor Byington, you do have a resolution now? at this point?
Yes, I want to thank everybody for your reports. I appreciate that. As mentioned earlier, the resolution that I'm introducing does 2 things. First of all, it accepts the report and the accomplishments made towards the goals and objectives of the 2004 Comprehensive Plan, and it recognizes that the 2004 Comprehensive Plan of the City of Oakwood as a document of continuing validity as the city's official policy guide for physical development, addressing the use of land, the movement of vehicles and pedestrians, the protection of community character, and the provisions of parks, schools, and other public facilities. So with all that being said, I will move that council adopt this resolution this evening.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments for Vice Mayor Byington? Hearing none, Lori, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Duncan?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Byington?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mrs. Hilton?
Yes.
Mrs. Turbin?
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes the legislation portion of our meeting tonight.